Welcome to Sakshi TV's special immigration show with attorney Ms. Sheila Murthy from Murthy Law Firm. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 3 immigration shows every week. On Tuesday at 3 p.m. EST with attorney Ms. Sheila Murthy, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. EST with attorney Prashanti Reddy in English, and on Friday at 6 p.m. EST with Bhanu Ilindra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on this show is not legal advice and is for general informational purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for your use of the information. If you need specific legal advice, please contact the attorney directly. Ms. Murthy needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please log on to murthy.com for contact information. From the beginning, Murthy.com has put a wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of the immigrant community and for the benefit of US employers. The Murthy.com site provides you with the latest and cutting-edge information on US immigration law and policies, explained in terms you don't have to be a lawyer to understand. Today's topic are FAQs on green card processing. We will continue the knowledge session along with the last week's session, followed by Q&A. Before we get into the topic, you can call us on the numbers on the screen for questions related to immigration and also ask tips. Hello, Ms. Murthy.
Hi, good afternoon, Thorani. So good to see you again, and welcome to all our regular participants and anyone who's new that's joining us for this Sakshi TV program.
Same
Pleasure
here.
to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to host you. Before we get on to the topic, do we have any latest immigration updates this week?
So some of the things that we just talked about, of course, was the elimination of the block that had been instituted starting from the Trump administration, which the Biden administration continued, preventing citizens of many countries, the Schengen countries, a list of 33 countries, including India and Morocco and many European countries, from entering the United States because of large numbers of people getting the COVID-19 because of the pandemic and the virus. So the Biden administration just made an announcement yesterday officially that they were going to lift the ban effective from November in 2 months, as long as the people had completed either the 2 vaccines or the one, if it was a one-shot vaccine, along with negative tests, etc. All of the details are now being released. And India is on that list, so a lot of people who were stuck and couldn't travel will now be able to enter the United States. Of course, the timing isn't perfect because most parts of America tend to be quite cold in November and December, and they were also waiting for the infection rate to be much lower before they would be willing to open up the rest of the world to come in. And I think both London and Brussels and the European Union had negotiated very hard to get the United States to open its borders. And luckily, India is able to take advantage of that too.
Well, yay. So I think it's a great news for all the Indian immigrants who want to travel to the US. On that note, Ms. Murthy, we have a caller waiting, Mr. Sandeep from Illinois. Thank you for calling, Sandeep. You can ask Ms. Murthy your question directly.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Hello.
Yes. Hi, Sandeep. You're on the line. Yes, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Ms. Murthy. Thank you so much for taking my call. My question is regarding my I-485 application. In fact, I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago regarding my situation. So I told you about that virtual marriage. So I have a 485 application pending, and I have received my EAD. And also yesterday, I received my RFE for my medical records to be submitted. Okay, so they provided me to submit the medicals before the end of this month for my visa allocation. If not, the deadline is supposed to be December 13th. But what I've come to know is the marriage certificate that I've received from the state of Utah for my virtual wedding is something that I cannot be presenting at the Department of State or at the visa consulate. So my options right now is basically to travel to India get married in the traditional way, and then ask my spouse to go for a H4 visa. My question to you right now is, can I travel to India with my RFE currently pending, and also with an EAD? Can I go to India and get my visa stamping done for my expired visa and then return back? What are the ramifications if I were to travel to India regarding this?
So Sandeep, as we explained, and I think last time when you called on the same Sakshi TV phone call to get information, I pointed out to you clearly that most likely the wedding that you said would be a valid wedding under Utah state law will probably not work, because there are very strict laws on what happens. And it looks like you've done some more research since then and found out that the Utah marriage, where the parties are not physically present, will not count as a valid marriage under Indian or US law for sponsorship purposes. When you're talking very case-specific advice, I know Torani mentioned it from Sakshi TV, you have to be very careful, because if there are some aspects of either your background or your prospective bride's background that we are not aware of, everything we're telling you will not be effective or valid. So if this is really life and death for you, and it's your marriage and it's your livelihood, please, it doesn't have to be Murthy Law Firm, it doesn't even have to be me. Please continue and follow up and ensure that you are actually doing a proper consultation with any other details that you may not be able to share in a 2 or 3 minute, discussion. But in general, it's possible, if you have an H-1B petition validity that is still valid, that is approved for you, let's say for 2 more years, you then go abroad using your EAD and AP, but you're trying to come back on the H-1B visa stamp, that's allowed. Then your spouse will then be allowed to apply for the H-4 based on your H-1B petition approval, showing the valid bona fide marriage that has occurred and taken place under the Hindu Marriage Act, if you both are Hindus, or under the Special Marriage Act under Indian law, showing, if it's the Hindu Marriage Act, for example, you have to show you've gone around the fire 7 times, tied the Mangal Sutra, the priest is in the photo. You have to show very important proper photos to show the validity and the bona fides of the marriage under Indian law. And again, India has different laws for different religions, unlike the United States, where it's all sort of, you can do it in the courthouse and you're done with it. Once you're able to then satisfy that, get the H-1B visa for yourself, the H-4 for the spouse, then both of you can re-enter the US. And in fact, if your final action dates are current, Sandeep, your spouse should be eligible to file her I-485 literally on the first day that she enters the United States. That means both of you should actually prepare and have the entire package ready with birth documents, birth certificate, marriage certificate, all of the information required for her I-485, her I-765, and her I-131, so that literally the day she re-enters, you then apply for 85 for her. And of course, your case is likely to get approved, your 485 before hers, because it was already filed more than a year ago. But by filing the 485, that way her H-4 status does not become improper or invalid, because the day your green card is approved, your 485, on that day, her H-4 status is no longer valid unless she has filed a 485 and is now considered in a period of stay authorized by the Attorney General, or the POAS as we refer to it. And so based on that, she's allowed to continue to stay, hopefully gets the EAD card in 6 or 8 months, so she can also start working if she so chooses. And within 6 months, year, whatever, if the priority date's current, the USCIS approves her 485, then she can get the green card here. In the alternative, if your 485 gets approved, then she cannot enter on the H-4 status because you're no longer on H-1B. And then you would have to do consular processing, which, as you know, could take a year or 2 years to get approved from abroad. And that would obviously be a separation which is not ideal for newly married, newlyweds to not be living together. I always say, be with us together, argue together, be together at least, rather than being separated and dealing with all those additional tensions. Good luck, Sandeep. I know this is a very important decision in your life. This is your marriage and your future. So please be savvy and smart about it. Talk to your company lawyer, schedule a consultation with somebody that understands it, because I feel like I'm giving a very, very specific advice on a situation that we don't know every nuance or every detail about it. Okay? Thank you.
Right. Ms. Murthy, so you were talking about the updates. Are there any other updates that you want to give our viewers? Any other immigration updates?
Well, there are lots of little updates. For example, the Social Security Administration has just issued, as we said, an update that you can, when filing your I-130 form or I-485 form or I-765, you can actually request that I don't want to go to a Social Security Administration office. Back in the day, all of us had to go to the Social Security Administration to get a new Social Security card, which doesn't have the words valid only with permission from USCIS or something, or from Department of Homeland Security. If you just want that without going to the Social Security Administration, wasting your time and their time, then you can check off saying, please mail me the Social Security card without that restriction when the EAD is approved. So with the 765 and the 485, you can do that. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Department of Labor with regard to H-1Bs and people working at home and how they need to post the notice of posting on the refrigerator or in their house for H-1B workers. Hopefully the company lawyer and the company have explained that to you. So there's a lot of nuances, but these were the two of the hot things that had just come out in the past week, Thorny.
Right. So, all right, since the updates are, we're done with the updates, can I go forward with the questions?
Absolutely.
Right.
Thorny.
So, Ms. Murthy, could you explain to us the PERM process?
So PERM is the first stage in the green card process. PERM is the Permanent Electronic Review Management. It was the shortened, faster way to process. Before, labor certifications used to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, like years and years, many, many years. PERM reduced it, made it much faster, more streamlined, more electronic. Basically, but you still have to go through the major steps of the process to show the US Department of Labor that there is no ready, willing, and available US worker who can do the particular job. So for example, if you're working as a software engineer or programmer analyst, the employer has to try to advertise in the newspaper. So you have to show the newspaper, the ads, the language, who all applied for the job, then submit that with the form ETA 9089. And before that, you actually do the ETA 9141 for the prevailing wage determination to get that, to show what is the wage for the particular job in that location, because different parts of the United States have different prevailing wage determinations because standard of living is higher in some parts of the country compared to others. For example, New York City or San Francisco may be much more expensive than, let's say, Idaho or, Vermont or something like that. And based on that, then the employer has to run the ads, see who all apply, explain why they're not hiring that person unless there are multiple jobs with the employer. And once PERM is approved, then the employer has to file the I-140 petition to show financial ability to pay and the qualifications of the individual for the job. And then the third stage of the green card, of course, is the 485 adjustment of status or consular processing. So those are the three main steps in every single green card case.
Right. So we have a caller on hold, Ms. Murthy, Mr. Gautam from India. Thank you for calling, Gautam. You can ask Ms. Murthy your question directly.
Hello, ma'am. A very good morning.
Hi, Gautam.
Hello. Hello, ma'am. My question actually is, I actually got picked up for my H1 lottery for the last March, and filed a petition from my company, and my company have all, done all the procedure. The thing is, I have no experience, but I've done my bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering. Then after I've been moved to UK to do my master's, and luckily I got picked up for my H1B this March, and now I've been waiting for my status to be changed from case received to case accepted or RSE. My only question here is there a chance for me to get approved without experience, or does the experience really matter rather than the field I am working in and the degree I've done already? if it really matters, if I get rather than case approved RSC, so what would be my next step must be?
So Gautam, you don't need experience. A lot of people make up experience, fraudulent experience, improper experience, etc. But you don't need any experience because first of all, that's a crime and it's illegal. And once there's fraud, obviously there's permanent lifetime bar. So you don't need any experience. Just your bachelor's degree, if it's in the specific field of the job that you're planning to do, bachelor's in, whatever, computer science, electronic engineering, computer engineering, etc., then that's all you need because the H-1B, all that it requires is a specialty occupation where the degree matches the job. Now, when it's no experience, it may be considered a level 1 job, and there was concern and there was talk about eliminating level 1 and level 2 altogether in the US. But let's face it, there was a lawsuit recently filed, and that it was victorious for people who challenged, saying it is illegal for the government to require only very high salaries because H-1B, the law itself and the regulations do not require experience in order to qualify for a specialty occupation. Whether you're a new surgeon, a medical, an engineer, a teacher, every job has a starting level 1, and therefore that should be permissible. I hope that's helpful for you, Gautam. Good luck. I hope you get your H-1 approved, and I hope we can welcome you here to the United States and help you with your immigration processing for you, your family, and your friends.
Right. Ms. Murthy, while that was sound advice, I have another question in queue for you. So let's say someone has applied for their family member's visa while they're on green card, right? And later they become a US citizen. How does this affect their family members?
So depending on the kind of situation, so there are different processing and priority date movement times for spouse or child or sibling, whatever case it is for. So if it is, for example, your father or mother is a permanent resident, files for you as an unmarried adult for the I-130, then the first parent becomes a citizen. The case gets upgraded from family-based third preference to family-based first preference as adult unmarried child of a US citizen or adult married child. Then after the person becomes a citizen, it becomes the case can continue. On the other hand, if the person got married, the child, before the mother or father became a US citizen, then the case gets completely eliminated or canceled. So sometimes you can get an upgrade, sometimes it can cancel it, sometimes it can help the case get approved faster because priority dates for citizens generally is faster than permanent residents, except we have seen, for example, in the Philippines, the sibling, the brother or sister of a fourth preference, I think is taking 22 or 25 years to process certain countries as the citizen, or even for sponsoring for the child as a citizen takes longer than as a permanent resident. So you have to do the homework and check the dates before us asking your relative or allowing them to file for citizenship and understanding what the risks are for continuing your case.
Right. Understood. We have a caller on hold, Ms. Geeta from Texas. Thank you for calling, Geeta. You may ask Ms. Murthy your question directly.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. I have two questions. Actually, my husband went for a downgrade in October 2020, and still our 140 is pending. But I received an EAD and AP. So can I use this EAD for my work, even though 140 is pending?
Oh, yes. Once you get the EAD approval, once the I-485 is filed, even if the I-140 is not approved, the EAD is valid until it is cancelled or revoked or something. If once the date is issued, Geeta, on that day, you're allowed to start working with the EAD because that's what it is. It's an employment authorization document. It is valid either for 1 year or 2 years. And during that time, from the day it is approved, from that day, you can start working, doing any work, anything, subject to whatever the terms and conditions are. With the EAD based on 485, there are no major restrictions. It's almost like being a green card holder. You can do any job, you can do multiple jobs, you can do part-time job, full-time jobs, anything that you feel like doing. It's almost like being a US permanent resident or US citizen in terms of being unrestricted, except that it has a time limit, the 1 year or 2 years. And before it expires, obviously, you want to file the extension well in time so that there's no gap. Good luck, Geeta. I hope you get a job and I hope you start working right away.
Right. Ms. Murthy, my next question for you is, could you please explain to us what a priority date is?
So the priority date is the date when in an employment-based case, when the perm labor certification is filed with the US Department of Labor, not when you start getting the prevailing wage or start running the newspaper ads. It is the date that the perm is filed, and then it is actually assigned by the USCIS when the I-140 petition is filed and approved. Then that priority date is noted on the I-140 petition approval. And based on your priority date, it will determine when you and your family can do either consular processing or file the adjustment of status, when your green card will get approved based on dates of filing or final action date. That is in an employment-based case. In a family-based case, the priority date is given on the date the I-140 petition is actually filed with the USCIS. And finally, even if the case is approved after 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, the date that the receipt notice, the I-130 package was received by USCIS, then in the approval notice, they will use that as the priority date. And again, based on that priority date, the family member will get the green card, depending on which category. Is it family-based? First preference, second preference, third preference, fourth preference in family-based cases. And employment-based cases also, you have EB1, first preference, EB2, second preference, employment-based, second preference, 3, and then 4 is for special immigrants, including priests and, EB, and then of course the 5th preference is the EB5. I hope that was helpful and gives you an idea of what's the priority date. And the Department of State Visa Bulletin.
Right.
Yeah, and the Visa Bulletin, Department of State releases that every month, telling you what the different priority dates are and how that works and which date can file the I-485, etc.
Right, right. So we have another caller on hold, Mr. Satya from National Tenesa. Thank you for calling, Satya. You can ask Ms. Murthy your question directly.
Thank you. Hello, ma'am. I'm actually about to downgrade and port my I-140 from EB2 to EB3 from employer A to employer B. So my question is, can I go ahead with premium processing? I'm about to file my I-140.
So as I've said before, Satya, in most of these calls, that the premium processing option is available, but up to the USCIS whether or not they will accept it under the premium processing program, because they are supposed to have the original perm labor certification with that service center in order for them to approve the case, the I-140 under the premium processing program. So if it is with that same service center, we have seen them accepting it. Sometimes we have seen them accepting it even from a different service center and approve it. In other cases, they say, here's your money, take back your premium processing, but we won't allow you to process it because we are not willing to do it on a premium processing because they are backed up with case processing, or that the original perm or the previous perm was not filed within their jurisdiction and was not in the original EB2 filing. So if you are filing with the same service center where your EB2 petition was filed, then there's a higher chance that the premium processing will be permitted because the same USCIS service center has the original perm that was used for the EB2 filing that can now be used for the EB3 filing upgrade. I hope that was helpful for you.
Right. So what are the other ways of, fastening up or speeding up the green card processing apart from premium processing? Are there any other ways, perhaps?
Yes, Tharani. So what we've obviously, besides the premium processing, if it is available for certain case types and certain types of petitions or applications, any time and every single time, if somebody believes that something is in the national interest or will truly help the employer or help the US economy or cause grave and undue hardship. Now, most people say, well, for me, it causes undue hardship because my family and I are suffering, and that's 100% true. But USCIS looks at it as a bigger picture because then they would have to put every case out of line to process it on an expedited basis. So you can always request expedite with the USCIS by going through the expedite criteria on murthy.com website, where we have posted tons of articles. We write what are the legal expedite criteria. And in fact, I think about a year or 2 years ago, USCIS updated and changed, modified some of their expedite criteria on what can be done, and when it is permissible and how to request it, etc. And obviously, if you have a good lawyer, your lawyer should be familiar with that process as well. So if you believe that a particular situation is extremely important for humanitarian reasons, economic reasons, business reasons, financial reasons, companies suffering, national interest, doctors coming in during COVID, all of that, they have been giving expedites, but they're very rare because USCIS does not want to encourage people to start requesting expedites in every single case.
Right.
I hope you can get it.
Yeah, I did. So, but I want to ask another major issue that, another FAQ that we get a lot is about a backlog. So, what exactly is a backlog in green card processing?
So the backlog is just where the government is backed up in processing cases. So if you file your 485 and your priority date is current for 2 years, the government is just backlogged, meaning backed up with their processing. And previously, before the prior Trump administration, most I-485s, when the priority date was current, within 6 months, 3 to 6 months, we used to get approvals in majority of the cases. Now, because of the huge backlogs, meaning the pipeline is completely backed up, what we are seeing is that the USCIS is not approving the case for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years in some cases. That means that they are so backed up in their case processing that they are delaying approving the case. So even though the priority date is current, all the information is in the file, they are still unable to process that case. That's what a backlog means, Taurani.
Right. So, Ms. Murthy, I want to understand, and to our viewers as well, what is consular processing and who needs to go through consular processing?
Very good question.
Thank
So
you.
consular processing is where after the perm is approved, the I-140 is approved, a person can choose to either do adjustment of status, adjust within the United States if everybody is here, or let's say, like in that example that Sandeep gave where he's abroad, his spouse is stuck there, or somebody's family or child went to India or some other part of the world and they're stuck, then to bring that person back into the US, once the person has already got the green card, the principal, then the family members have to do something called CP or consular processing. For them to get the immigrant visa, similar to H-1 visa, you get the immigrant visa from the immigrant section. In India, there are only 2 consular posts that do the immigrant visa, Mumbai and Delhi. All the others like Hyderabad, Chennai, Chennai and Kolkata, the 3 of them only do the non-immigrant visas, right? The immigrant visas are done only in Delhi and Mumbai. And so they would apply for the consular case, get the visa stamped, enter the US as green card holders. From the day you get the stamp, usually you have only 180 days to enter the US, except because of COVID-19, they're making exceptions and giving additional time.
Right. Thank you for the wealth of information you've shared with our viewers today and for the sound of advices you've given our callers as well. It's always a privilege hosting you, Ms. Murthy.
The honor and privilege is mine. I'm thrilled to be here and continue to do amazing work, Taurani, and inspire and motivate everybody. And it's truly a pleasure. Looking forward to continuing to help all of you. Take care and have a good afternoon or good night. Bye-bye.
Same here. Thank you, Ms. Murthy. You're watching Sakshi TV Live with me, Torini Makana. Thank you.